Hey, Corinne.
So we're just letting people in. We have about 40 people in right now, and people are still coming in. It's 7:30. Do you want to start? Do you want to wait a couple of minutes?
I just texted you and Deb a question. So let's get that.
Okay.
Oh, and Moira said she just got kicked out. She's signing back in.
I don't see Maura.
She's signing back in right now.
Okay.
All right. I think we have one more panelist. We're just going to give one more minute to come on in. We can reach her.
I just texted her.
Okay, thank you.
Is Maura in?
You know, I just realized it's almost the same number of participants as we had last year in person. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I don't see Moira yet. She's coming back in. She just said she was trying to log back on.
Okay.
It should be good.
Let me check my email just in case.
Oh, there she is. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Excellent.
We're at 81 people and we still have people coming in.
Oh, that's awesome.
This call is mainly for parents, but kids are welcome, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it's 7:34. Maybe we should start.
Alrighty, guys. Deb, do you want to do your introduction?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see all of you, and I hope you're happy to be seeing your fellow fifth grade parents. I also want to welcome our middle school panelists and our PTA council members. This is Middle School 101. We're happy you can join us. I'm Debbie Villarreal-Hadley, President of the Montclair PTA Council. The mission of the PTA Council is to support school PTAs in their work, advocating for the success and well-being of their students. The PTA Council functions as a representative body of the PTAs so that the voices of parents and caregivers are more effective in influencing decisions made at the individual school and district level. We meet with the officers of the PTA monthly, and we have committees that work on various issues that are common to all of our students, like the Community Building Committee, chaired by Marcy Lucerne, that put together tonight's events. I thank them very much. With that, I will turn it over to Amy Allfelder, who is an outgoing Vice President of the PTA Council, and who will be introducing the panel for this evening. Amy?
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Ulfelder. I'm a current Glenfield parent, and also I have a student at the high school. And welcome to Middle School 101. Thank you guys for your patience when we rescheduled last week. This is a community event for everybody's information, but it didn't quite seem to be the right timing last week on Blackout Tuesday. So we appreciate you guys coming back to join us this week when we rescheduled. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Tonight we are here to talk about advice from parents to parents. So you will hopefully be getting a separate orientation or information session from your individual middle school that will give you a lot of very rich details about what is special, particular, and of the utmost importance to your school specifically and to your incoming student. But tonight is about all those things we all wish we knew before our kids started middle school. So that is the spirit of what we are going to do together. And before I introduce the panelists, I just want to spend 1 minute and tell everyone what you probably already know, which is that there's a lot about the next school year that we just have no idea how it's going to work. If you've already spoken to administrators from your current schools or your future schools, you'll know that all the plans for next year are in the works and a little bit up in the air. And while they are looking out for our students, they just don't know exactly what it's going to look like. So in order to keep this as informative as possible, we're going to talk about what a regular year would look like, because we just can't predict a future that we don't know anything about. To that end, we welcome any and all questions. You guys are free to chat, put in the chat box if you don't know how to do that, and ask questions. And if we don't get through them in the core part of our panel, we'll get to them at the end. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce all of our panel members. From Buzz Aldrin, we have Mary Sue Yoon. I'm going to wave. And Selma Avdicevic.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Okay. From Renaissance, we have Tom Hogan. And
Hey,
from
everybody.
Field, we have Jessica Schachter and Maura McCallum. So we're going to be kind of informal. We have a lot of questions that we've all been asked over the years that we've collated for tonight. And again, if you guys have questions, put them in the chat, and we will do our best to get to them either in line or save them all to the end. So without further ado, how was the adjustment from middle school to elementary school? And what was the biggest surprise for your family and your student? Mary Sue, you want to start?
Sure. So I have a current 7th grader at Buzz, and then I also have an older child who's an 11th grader at the high school. So it's my second time going through that transition. I think the biggest thing is that it feels at first like a very big building, and you know, they get multiple teachers per day, and a schedule that perhaps seems confusing at first to parents. But I think what surprised me is how quickly they understand that, and kind of the kids understand it and kind of take ownership of it. And so there's definitely a transition in terms of expectations of organization and workload that I think we'll talk about a little bit more. But I think the biggest thing is that, you know, it's the next step in their independence. And as a parent, that could be really hard too. As I have one who's in high school and about to graduate high school after next year, it gets harder as they get older. But I think like letting them sort of take the lead on some things and really start to take ownership of their work a little bit more is really what happens in middle school. And I think we've definitely seen that at Buzz.
That's great. Tom?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. The biggest change is just the level of independence that they're required. You know, the teachers actually do a great job, I think, in the first couple of weeks at Renaissance and getting them sort of established and set up, making sure they can navigate Google Classroom, which I'm sure they're all pretty familiar with now. But the biggest change is just how independent they are. There's a lot of things they need to keep track of, and I think you'll be surprised how quickly your child will adapt. I have a ninth grader at the high school, a seventh grader at Renaissance, and a fifth grader who will be at Renaissance next year, as well as a second grader. So I think one of the surprising things really has been how quickly they do adjust. You kind of feel when you first enter the middle school or the high school, you're nervous about, you know, how your child is going to adapt, but they figure it out quite quickly.
That's great. Jessica? You're on mute.
She's muted by the host.
Where is Jessica?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there.
Second row, second person.
Here.
There you go.
There we go. So yeah, I agree with the other parents. My daughter was definitely overwhelmed. She came from Bradford and then went to Glenfield, and we were kind of shocked with how big the building was. We were definitely shocked that after school, the doors open and the kids pour out. You know, in the elementary schools, there's an adult, there's a teacher, and they're making sure that the child is going with the parent and that they're going to the proper place and going to the proper bus. And everybody was sort of stunned that in sixth grade, it's up to you. You get to your bus, or you walk home, or you get to your parent or to your ride. And that was definitely overwhelming, but I was very, very happy with Glenfield, in that everybody was so incredibly friendly. The administrators, the principals, the security guards, it was overwhelming. And my daughter did get used to it quickly. But in the beginning, I was really encouraged by the fact that everybody was approachable. And when you didn't know something, nobody looked at you sort of crazy. They directed you to the right place. And that made me feel a lot better about it.
So what else would you guys recommend doing to prepare? Like, what's some of the things that you think parents could do over the summer? Moira, do you have any?
Yeah, the one thing I would add, I have twins, sixth graders at Glenfield right now. And especially for those of you transitioning from Hillside, the time change is significant. My kids were on the bus at 7:13. So you got to just start talking to your kids about it. Whatever is going to work for you to get them ready, just be aware that was a big change. It's also a big change for them to come home. My kids were in the door by 2:30. So if you have work schedules to think about what you're going to do there, you're just going to want to prepare for that. But I also would then just echo the other folks that the transition organizationally and independence-wise was significant, but there's a lot of support to get the kids through that.
So I see just general start time information. Buzz and Glenfield have the same start time. 7:40, I think, is first bell, and 2:09 is final bell. Tom, can you remind me? I know you guys have a new schedule at Renaissance. I don't want to give out the wrong information.
Yeah, I want to say it's 8:15 start time or 8:20 start time. So it's a little bit later. But again, it'll be an adjustment in the summer, making sure everyone's back on schedule.
Did you guys do anything to prepare your kids special to get them ready for early start time?
No, it's early start time, and I think also just reminding them to make use of the resources that they have. So, you know, one of the great things about Renaissance is that it's a very small school. It's a tight-knit teacher team. There's support teachers in place. The support teachers do a wonderful job of really helping kids get organized, you know, helping them with study skills. And so I think it's just making sure that you remind them over the summer that, they're in 6th grade now, so they need to be independent. If they have a problem, they can always come to us as parents, and we can work with the teachers, but we would prefer them to sort of do that directly with the teachers and the support teachers. And I think, reminding them to get comfortable with their teachers, so that if they have a question or have a problem, they can be the first, they can take the steps themselves. So trying to make sure that they can resolve their own problems. And obviously as parents, we'll step in and help, but really encouraging them to be as independent as they can, because as they do that, they'll sort of build on some of the skills they need throughout middle school and also in high school.
Selma, did you want to add something?
Yes, for that first week of school, what is really important for everyone to know is that there will be parents whose children are going to Buzz, that there's also this peer mentor program. So the students that are 8th graders that are part of the program, and most of them are Junior Honor Society members, and this is part of the service that they do for school, is they will be wearing purple t-shirts that say peer mentor on them. And they will be stationed on different hallways at every bell. So they will basically be acting as peer mentors and peer guides to the students that are in a building that find themselves lost. And they are specifically chosen because of their skill set, that they are not shy, that they can spot children that seem a little bit lost, and they are available to them to be approached. They are approachable, so the kids can ask them to get direction. Now, I'm guessing we're gonna talk about the house structure and all of that.
You can go right into that.
I can go into that? Okay.
You just asked that question, and that was later, but I know we'll get a lot of questions about that.
So the way physically houses are structured at Buzz is that essentially every house has its own hallway. So all of the core classes for that particular house are in that hallway. So you would basically have your social studies, math, English language arts classroom, and your science classroom in one hallway, because those are your core classes. And then electives and phys ed and any other related arts classes are likely downstairs in the basement or obviously in one of the gyms. So, it may seem daunting at first because the building is so large. There's over 600 children in that building. There's a lot of kids from everywhere, but it's so well organized and so well structured that your kids, if they do like structure, if they thrive on that, they will find themselves very, very easily within first few days feeling themselves at home. The biggest, and this is not for Hillside kids because I know they already know how to handle lockers. For kids that like mine that came from Watchung, I currently have a 7th grader and a 6th grader at Buzz. One of the big transitions and issues was lockers. If your lockers are not right outside of your classroom, for example, my son's locker is right next to his homeroom. So that was such a great, because he's not the organized one in this family. So that was great because he could get to his things and get his textbooks and everything that he needed immediately. But my daughter's locker was actually 3 hallways down away from her homeroom. So she was perpetually being either logging around the entire backpack full of books or just being late to class all the time. So that also is going to be something that they're going to have to get used to, that track and kind of managing their time, managing their resources, managing their locker and what goes in it, what doesn't go in it, things like that. But all of these, I just want to say it, all of these are fantastic benchmarks, and your children will rise to the occasion. We promise you that. We've all been there. I cried, I think 10 times when my now incoming 8th graders started Buzz, because I was like, oh my God, he's so little. There's such a big building. There's so many kids and so many things to do. And he was like, within 2 days, he's like, I got this. And they will, we promise you, also figure out the schedules much better than we ever would. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate, I see a couple questions about, is there going to be online learning for sixth graders at the beginning of the year, and what, if anything, are the counselors and the schools going to be doing to provide extra support? I think the short answer to the second question is easier, and that's a lot. I know that at Glenfield we've heard that they are planning to do a lot of extra support and a lot of extra checking in on the kids to see where they are academically, socially, and emotionally. But as far as what the actual school year is going to look like next year for sixth graders or anyone else, we don't have that information yet. The district has not shared it with parents. I think that they still have it in the works. So we can't really talk about what we don't know. So we're going to try to help you out with what we do know. And, you know, we'll be in this together when we get the information about what the days are going to look like come September. I see we're still on the house topic. How are house placements determined and requested? At Glenfield, there's open and closed houses. So that's a little bit different than Buzz, which just kind of has houses by number that are all separate classrooms. So at Glenfield, if you think your student will be better off in a closed or an open house, you can send that request to the principal, and they will do what they can in order to balance the houses with the numbers and the information that they have to use for that. They do honor requests when they can, but it is just that it's a request, and you can put them into Ms. Pierce starting now. Renaissance doesn't have a house system. I don't know if there's any requests or anything that you guys can speak to, Tom. Is there anything?
Yeah, no, so Renaissance is a relatively small school, so there's no house system. The students, you know, sort of spend a lot of time in their homerooms, so they tend to have their core classes together, so science, math, English, and social studies as a group. But it's a relatively small community, so the kids get to know each other relatively well. The nice thing about Renaissance is that you know, a lot of kids are so some kids are sort of slated to go to Renaissance, others choose to go there. So even though it is a small community, it tends to be one where kids find friends relatively quickly. And since it's a small group, the teachers tend to know the students pretty well.
The quick difference between open and closed houses at Glenfield is that the open house is called that because it's a very big room with divisions of lockers and like soft walls. And the closed house means that it's a more traditional individual classroom. Truthfully, the kids in the open house still don't see the other kids in the closed houses or in the other classes. It's not like one big free-for-all. They are segmented, but they're not individual classrooms. It's a bigger space that's divided up by furniture. Can anyone speak to, before we go further, what the transition might be like for a child coming in with an IEP?
Take it. Yeah. So my older daughter, when she went to Buzz, had an IEP, and I think that, of course, it depends on, you know, that particular student's needs and what is in their IEP. For my daughter, she had instead of having her foreign language class, she had a study skills class in her schedule because that's what was requested for IEP. It worked really well for her because the study skills class was a time where she could do some extended time for testing. She could also get some organizational skills from the study skills teacher who was a special education educator. And she also got speech services, physical therapy, occupational therapy services. We were concerned about her moving from, you know, elementary to a bigger middle school, but we actually found that it was a wonderful transition into Buzz, and she loved the house system and the idea that, you know, her group of friends was sort of contained within that house that she was in. So she had a very smooth transition and found a lot of support. And I think it also prepared her really well for the high school. And I'm happy to answer, you know, I can give out my email address. I'm happy to answer more specific questions because I know this is a public forum and the poster might not want to give a lot of details, but I'm happy to answer more specific questions, and I'll put my email in the chat.
Does anybody else want to speak to that one? I think I would also just recommend to reach out to the SACs at the middle school, reach out to the student advisors right away and start to find out like who you're going to be speaking to there. They're very approachable at all three middle schools. They're really helpful. And sometimes you can have a dialogue with them, maybe different than you might get from the principal right away.
And in addition, I think there is supposed to happen a transition of the child study team from the elementary school to the middle school. So that meeting was supposed to be happening right now between the two teams. And the information and the IEP obviously is all electronic. However, the conversation between the team members should be happening. And I suggest you find out who will be part of that team when your child is in fact a buzz. So you know who will be the individuals who will be directly responsible for the implementation of the IEP.
Cool. Okay. Mara?
Amy, yeah, I just also want to mention something that is new at middle school, and I don't know if Buzz loops as well, but it is looping. So just so you're aware, when we say that your child is going to be in a house, it means they're going to have 4 core teachers. Those are going to be their teachers for the next 3 years at Glenfield. So that doesn't change at all. It's a lovely transition. The teachers get to know the students. They're going to be there to welcome our 6th graders back in 7th grade, which is great, especially given what we've all gone through right now. And they do really stay with this. They stay with the same group of students as well. There's absolutely interaction between the houses. There's a little bit of overlap during lunch and deer. You know, they might see each other, but generally in their electives. 6th graders have the same elective period, so they will see students from the other house at that time. And there's another elective period, 9th period. They'll also see people from other houses and actually other grade levels during 9th period.
So that's a great time to segue into electives. Do you want to talk about how many?
Amy, sorry to interrupt. Before you start that, do we want to actually talk about the schedule? Because Moira mentioned it, because Buzz has a different schedule than the 45-minute periods that both Renaissance and Glenfield have.
Renaissance has longer periods, but why don't you tell us about Buzz's schedule quickly, and then Tom can explain Renaissance.
Yeah, so just as a point of difference, and some of you may already know this, is that Buzz operates on a block schedule, which means that it's a double class period. So every class that you would have in normal school would be 40 minutes. At Buzz, they are 80 minutes. For this is also a looping schedule, which means that they have their core classes every second day. So in any given week, for example, it's based on an A day through F day schedule. So for example, A, C, and E days are the same. And then B, D, and F days are the same. And don't worry, your kids will get this by day 5. They will know this. You don't have to remember this because they will. The teachers are very good explaining this to them. And in addition to that, they'll have 3 electives in addition to the core courses. They have 3 electives, right? Yeah, that's, I think, I keep forgetting, which remind me to go back to Tracy's question about parent engagement. So they have 3 electives, which they meet every 3rd day. Again, kids will get this. You don't have to. So yeah, so if you have any additional questions on the Buzz schedule, happy to answer those.
Tom, can you?
Yeah, Renaissance has a relatively traditional schedule. So there's 4 core classes, obviously math, science, English, and social studies that you have every day. They also have band or chorus. You get to choose one of those 2, a foreign language, dance, which is required, and then gym. Then there's electives. Electives are typically at the end of the day. So electives could be, they kind of vary. So some electives are once a week. There are other electives that you can take that are Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday. And then Renaissance has sort of a unique program where they tend to do a lot of field trips and special events on Fridays. And obviously, that's kind of in a normal year. We'll see what happens next year. But Renaissance tends to try to reserve some time on Friday to do. So as a class, they'll take field trips multiple places, and then try to tie that into the classroom either before and after. But that's kind of the basics of how Renaissance would work.
Okay, great. Jessica, do you guys need any more information about the Glenfield schedule, or Maura explained it?
I think she got it. Yeah, I don't know if there are any other questions, but yeah.
Okay, great.
Also, deer, I just wanted to add deer. That's lunch and gym for people who don't know what that is, because I didn't know what that was for quite some time. That's what they call lunch and gym.
No.
I'm sorry, lunch and recess. Excuse me, lunch and recess. Thanks, Amy.
Like,
I still don't know. No, really, lunch and recess. I do know, I swear.
but the kids know, and that's all that matters.
Things have changed since you went to middle school, right?
So, do you guys have information? If your sixth graders haven't gotten their schedule requests or elective requests yet, they should be getting them shortly from all the schools. I believe everyone is doing that in June. So we're not gonna go into detail on that, but do you guys want to talk a little bit about the homework and how the classes are manageable or not, or what kinds of tricks you guys have learned to help kids with that? Tom, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I actually quizzed my two older daughters one who went to Renaissance and now at the high school, and one who was at Renaissance now. They said, sixth grade was relatively manageable. I think the teachers, one of the nice things about Renaissance is it is a small core team of teachers. The teachers do a good job of not doubling up. So traditionally, the teachers know if there's going to be a math test on Tuesday, not to give a lot of homework and social studies that's also due Tuesday. So because there's a lot of project-based learning, they tend to space out the projects actually and do a pretty nice job of managing the workload. So the kids do tend to have homework pretty much every day. There's some longer-term projects that they need to sort of be on top of. The teachers do a good job of giving them sort of a roadmap that they need to sort of follow to get those projects done. They tend to get pretty good at managing their workload through Google Classroom. So, a lot of the work is managed that way. But I would say that they more complained. My daughter is more complained about the step up from sixth grade to seventh grade. But in the sixth grade, it seemed like it was manageable.
Mary Sue, did you have any?
Yeah, I would say at Buzz, the nice thing about having the AB schedule is that if you had a core course, say you have your English and math class on Mondays, it doesn't meet again until Wednesday. So you have 2 nights to do your homework. Of course, you always want to encourage your kid to do their homework on their first night so that it doesn't sort of build up. But I think with that schedule, it was able to be manageable because they would have homework that was assigned Monday that was due Wednesday, homework was assigned Tuesday, due Thursday, Wednesday due Friday perhaps, and then anything Thursday or Friday could have been over the weekend due the next week. That is one change from elementary to middle school, is that there may be weekend homework, which I don't really remember as much happening in elementary school. But I would say that both of my kids said it was manageable and that you'd get an assignment from each core course generally every time you have a core course, and then electives generally not so much homework or assignments. It depends on the elective, of course, but generally it's just the core courses giving the homework assignments.
Before we go to Glenfield, can you tell us which houses are available at Buzz for the fall?
1, 2, and 5 are available in the fall for Buzz.
Cool. Jessica, did you have any feedback on that?
Yeah, Glenfield homework, it was a lot. It was definitely more than elementary school. It was manageable, it was doable, but it was a lot. And I felt too, for the most part, the electives didn't give homework. And for the most part, electives are really just a lot of fun. And my daughter was sort of blown away that she was getting graded and going to school for painting on the walls. But it was fun. I mean, really productive stuff, not just random painting on walls. But she really enjoyed the electives. Very rarely did you get homework in electives. And if you did, it was fun homework. But they do have to work. It is a decent amount of homework every night.
To any of your
Sorry, Amy, and I see a question that sort of popped up 3 or 4 times. Do kids need a laptop for homework? So I'm just going to speak to that. They don't necessarily need a laptop, but they would need access to technology to see what their assignments are for the day and what things are due. Because most of the teachers, especially now at this point, where we are with COVID and we not knowing what is going to happen in the future, the kids, I remember this even from my son started 2 years ago. The homework was a lot of times posted on the website or in their Google Classroom or even sometimes in Genesis. So they would need access to those platforms to check what is due. Teachers will, they will still make them at the beginning write things down in their calendars to get kind of into the habit of writing down their homeworks, what is due for their homeworks. But once they kind of get into it and once the kids learn and become more comfortable with technology and internet access and using the computers, then more and more of that is being transitioned to virtual, and more homework is going to be posted online.
Okay, great. I actually was just holding off on that because we have a whole technology section.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's coming up in a minute.
Amy,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just want to say at Glenfield, I did not find that my kids' homework was typically posted online. Quite honestly, if they did have calendar books that were, last year at least, they were provided by the school. The teachers did have them use them initially. If they forgot homework, they were much more inclined to reach out to a friend in class. The other thing about Glenfield is that you will get a message, I found, from both houses every day. And so the teachers did communicate with us to let us know what the students were supposed to be doing, which was helpful. As independent as we want them to be and as we're encouraging them to be, it still gave us a little cross-check to make sure that what needed to be done was getting done.
Yeah, and to that end, I have to give my personal PSA, read the emails from the school, whether they're from the administration, whether they're from the parents, whether they're from the PTA, whether they're from the houses.
Right.
I have so many parents that are like, I didn't know. And it really has been emailed 5 times, and it'll keep your stress level low if you make it a habit to really check that, because with every middle school, there's just a lot more information for your kids, and it's helpful for you to know where to get the information that's aimed at you. Tom, did you want to add something?
No, I would say I would even go one step further and say get the Google Classroom password from your student and just get on their Google Classroom. So there's always a parent version of Google Classroom. I would say from my experience, it honestly hasn't been that helpful. And your kid is different. Every kid's a little bit different. I have four kids. They're all different. Some are self-starters. Some need a little more help than others. But being able to get onto their Google Classroom and say, hey, did you get this done? Did you do that done? Get that done is super helpful. And then, that they say, oh, I have an assignment, but I forgot what it is. You have access to Google Classroom as well. So I would recommend, first thing you do, day one, get the password for their Google Classroom and just be on it so you have it. And because at Renaissance, so all the kids are issued a Chromebook at Renaissance the first week of school. So there's a ton of stuff, even pre-COVID, there was a ton of stuff that was coming home via Google Classroom. Almost all their assignments were online. Most of their work was assigned via Google Classroom. So it's super helpful just to have that password to have a sense for what's happening. And I know as a parent of 4, it's always challenging. I get so many emails from the district. I'm getting like a dozen emails a day, it feels like. So being able to go on Google Classroom and say, okay, what assignment is from what child and who's doing what, was super helpful.
So,
I thought I was being helicoptered by checking Genesis every day.
Me too.
And you have Google Classroom passwords, dude.
Yeah, I know it. I would say, at first it kind of sounds a little bit crazy, and honestly, I'm not on it every day. But there was times when somebody was sort of saw the grades, you're like, wait, what grade? How are you getting that grade? And you're just like, all right, I'm going to be on Google Classroom. I'm going to make sure you're getting these assignments done. And again, every child is going to be different. My oldest is amazing. She's a super self-starter. She just cranks through her stuff every morning. My younger guys, they need a little more encouragement. They're definitely having a hard time with school from home. So they need a little more encouragement, where you can go on their classroom site and say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? All that kind of fun stuff. And honestly, it's not me. Kathleen does most of the work, but we both have it, so it's great.
So what tips do you guys have for communicating with teachers and administrators at the middle schools? Because I think that one of the biggest things I've seen my kids learn in middle school, and one of the best things to take away, is you want them to learn how to start to advocate for themselves, because that's critical in high school, and middle school is the best time to start to develop those habits. So where have you guys found you do the communication? Where do you have your kids do the communication? And what tips do you have for incoming parents so they know who to reach out to right away? Maura, do you want to start with that? You have two.
Sure. And actually it kind of touches base back on when people have just mentioned Genesis. So coming from elementary school, I did not rely a ton on Genesis for grades because they don't use it. Your child will have access to Genesis in 6th grade, as will you, and teachers will grade their homework, whatever it is. Their grades are posted in Genesis fairly quickly. I did not see a lot of papers come home anymore. You weren't getting test grades. This is a way you could keep track. Don't make yourself crazy. But it was helpful for me to be able to see if, there was something that wasn't right. It could, not so much about the grade, but if it's raising a red flag, if your kid's having trouble adjusting, if they seem to not be getting material, if they're not communicating with you the way that you might hope that they would. So to Amy's question, I try to help my children be more independent. If they would say, but I turned in that homework, I would say, well, then you need to either talk to the teacher or draft an email to the teacher. And it didn't happen a lot, but I would try to help them draft an email initially until they became more confident with the language they should be using. You're not texting a friend. I tried to give them some lessons about that too. I really tried where it was appropriate to have them do it. Things that I would not have found appropriate and I did not have to do. But if it was a bullying issue, if they felt that they had tried to communicate with the teacher and it had not worked, I might intervene. If I felt that my child was really struggling with something, I would absolutely reach out to the teachers. But I did really encourage their independence with support as they, moved into middle school.
Anyone else want to help with who to contact and when?
Yeah, I would just say that at Buzz, the teachers have been very responsive to email. And it's a good thing, try and get to back to school night or whatever that will mean in the fall, because that is a way to kind of very quickly get a face to the names of each of the teachers, and also to find out what's their preferred method of contact. But I found that teachers have been very responsive to email. Similarly to what Maura just said, I actually do try and encourage my children to independently advocate for themselves. Maybe it started off in 6th grade with a little more hand-holding, but definitely by 8th grade. If they were nervous about talking to a teacher about a situation, I might even role play, like, well, what would you say to the teacher? And kind of talk them through it to kind of get them to the point where they can feel comfortable talking to an adult in that way. And I would also say about the Genesis, it is definitely a step up in sort of learning. Their grades get added to, on a daily or weekly basis. And so sometimes initially you're like, oh, my child got a 0 on something and suddenly they have an F in the class or something. It may just be that the teacher hadn't caught up with grading on that, or it may be that your child hadn't turned in something, or, the teacher might have a policy of, if something's late, they, get a 0 in it. So it's kind of important to know what the teacher's policies are, but also don't immediately, go into a panic attack and call the teacher if you see that. It might just be that the grades are taking a couple days to catch up to where the teacher is in the grading process.
Yeah, and I will just add to that specifically for Buzz. I have kid in house 2 and a kid in a house 3. At the beginning of school, your teachers will communicate to you via email and also a piece of paper they will send home with your child, explaining to you exactly how the grade at the end of the term is being calculated. So what goes into it, a percentage of which project, midterm, finals, whatever, and how much percentage of the grade that is, homework included as well. Homework is graded. Most of the teachers, in my experience, in the 2 houses my kids are in, actually do not accept late assignments. And this is an adjustment that everyone will have to make in your house, including your kid. And a piece of advice that goes with that is that it is okay for them to fail some of these things. Middle school is a perfect ground for them to fail at this. We did this, I think, at the beginning of, like, actually the third semester of the 6th grade. We were helicoptering the first 2 semesters, and the third one we said, we just hands off, let's see what happens. And he failed miserably. He absolutely bombed in all the homeworks because he kept pushing them off, and then he was getting zeros. And then, you know, we didn't swoop in to try and fix it for him, because it is a part of the learning process, and it's part of them growing up to learn how to fix what they have messed up, and to learn in which ways they can communicate with the teachers to try and pick themselves up. And it builds resiliency, and it's a very important skill. So middle school, just repeating that again, is a perfect time to let your kids fail at something. It's okay, because they will bounce back.
So on the technology front, we talked a little bit about computers being needed or not needed. I think in general, they've been needed a lot more with remote learning, and that's something that all families have to face. But how did you guys handle the phone situation? Middle school seems to be a popular time for people to get phones. And can you tell us what you guys chose to do for your kids, how you handle any parental oversight of those devices, and how it's worked out? Mary Sue, you want to start?
Sure. So both of my children did get phones in 6th grade, but they were pretty well locked down either through, you know, screen time on iPhones or on other sort of third-party apps that can limit their time on certain websites. I also definitely adhered to the guidelines of different social media platforms. So for example, certain social media platforms, kids are not supposed to be having accounts on until they're 13. And I definitely talked to my children about that and why we felt strongly that they should not have any of those social media accounts. So we were proactive about talking about it. We also set clear consequences about abuse of the phone, and you know how it was a privilege, not a right, and could be taken away. I think it has gotten a lot better in the years of the middle school, and that the middle schools now have policies of the phones have to be off and away during the day. So it's not something where they're on their phones all day during class or even during lunch, but they are off and away and in the backpacks. They can use them after school to contact a ride or after their activities, but for the most part, they are away during the day.
Jessica, did you guys do phones?
Yeah, my daughter does have a phone. Fortunately, she doesn't really care about it. So she just doesn't bring it to school. If I ask her to bring it, she will, but it stays often in her backpack, and that is the rule at Glenfield. And they send emails regularly sort of screaming like, parents, you need to help us. Please tell your children. Because apparently kids do take them out and they do look at them and they do play with them and play music and all that thing. And they're very, very, very clear about the fact that if your kid has a phone in school, it must be off during the day, period.
That's a district policy, no?
It is, yeah.
I believe it is.
It was a little bit different school to school a few years ago, and now I think they've really streamlined it.
So yeah, because it's interesting Jessica just said that, because my daughter has a 7th grade friend at Glenfield, and she said she was told by her friend that there are no rules at Glenfield or Renaissance. They're all allowed to have their phones.
That's only
No, not allowed.
No.
Of course, I knew she didn't have the right information, but it's very interesting.
That's exactly what the Glenfield kids say about the Renaissance and Bus kids. They say they're allowed their phones.
Sure. So this is another, I think, learning step parents will find out when their kids get to middle school. A little bit of interesting choice of information they chose to share with us as parents.
Tom, what did you guys do about the phone?
Yeah, so both of my daughters got phones coming into 6th grade, and again, they're not allowed to use them in school. We do have third-party apps that control how much time they can spend on their phones and what websites they can go to. Then we have the ability as parents to sort of to actually see how much time they spend on what websites. Then we'll check that, not like all the time, but I just spot check it so they know that we're actually paying attention. I think what's interesting, it's been, obviously this has been a challenging time for all of our children. The phone, better or for worse, has been a good way for my high schooler in particular to stay in touch with friends and sort of do group chats and FaceTime and all those kind of fun things. So it's been a good way for them to stay connected, which has been helpful. I think one of the things we worry about and always sort of make sure that our children understand is just making sure that they know to be careful about what they post, if they post, making sure they're careful about what they say about other people, making sure that they're aware of cyberbullying, making sure they're not participating, making sure that they recognizing it if they see it so that they can be supportive of their friends, and just making sure they have a healthy relationship with the technology.
Laura, did you do phones or no?
Well, the pandemic broke us. No, my children went to middle school we had said you can have phones in 8th grade. And we really were on that until March 15th. And then we got them phones. And it really, we have a house phone. We are a dinosaur. We had a landline and it worked fine. When we did give them the phones, we made it clear that they were our phones. We were allowing them to have them. And there were a lot of rules that went along with it, including the no social media. We were respectful of the rules on the platforms, and they knew that we would take those phones at any time, and we do, to look at what's been happening on them. So we went as far as to say, if you deleted, if I know if my daughter's deleting a chat she was having, and then she will lose her phone for the day because clearly she's trying to hide something from me. So you just have to be vigilant, like make whatever choice is going to work best for your family. As I said, wanting them to have contact during this crazy time was really what pushed us to allow them to have them earlier than we'd anticipated.
Yeah, one other thing that we've done with our kids and their phones, they also originally we were going to wait, but then realized it was impossible considering our work schedules and their schedules and sitters and all this and that. So it became a necessity for them to have a way to communicate with us. What we have done is we have removed also and banned social media on the phone, so they were not allowed. We used because we're Apple households. What we've done is basically made the phone subordinate to my phone. So everything that they were doing on the phone was mirrored on my iPad, and we any app that they wanted to download, it had to get clearance from an adult. We also removed Safari, so they didn't have direct access to the internet, because we didn't want them finding all sorts of YouTube videos and circumventing some of the restrictions that they had on their house computer and things like that. So there are multiple ways you can do this. It really is, decision as a household, what you are comfortable with and, what works for you. But as you can tell from all of our answers, we've all done it differently and it works for us.
And Amy, I'm sorry to speak again, but just what also worked for us during this time is that when we identified it as school time, whatever that may be in your house, I made the kids follow the school rule. So their phones are off and away while they're at school. I didn't want them texting their friends when they were supposed to be watching a Zoom call. I didn't want, it was a distraction and they were supposed to be in school. So those phones, it was school rules during school time. And that worked for us. It might not work everywhere.
To that end, you just kind of touched on it, and I think everybody mentioned it. Middle school ends a lot earlier than a lot of the elementary schools, and some of the kids have a lot more freedom. So how have you guys handled the earlier start time? Do your kids participate in any after-school activities with the school, or do they now walk from school to after-school activities? Do you let them go uptown? I know that's a big question, but we're nearing the end of our time frame together, and I wanted to make sure that we touched on that a little bit, because to me, for my kids, that was the biggest difference after school, after transitioning to middle school?
You know, I can say something about start time. It's very early for the kids. And my daughter had zero interest in eating breakfast at 7 a.m. And I found that a lot of people felt that way. And I spoke to some of the teachers, and a lot of the teachers allowed the kids to have snacks in the morning. And they were really conscious of the fact that these kids weren't eating breakfast, full, really good, filling breakfasts before school. And so they let them eat something during class. And so I would send along a muffin or banana, an apple, you know, something that I felt, some cheese or yogurt, something I felt comfortable with my daughter eating, that knowing that she wasn't really having a good filling breakfast at 7 a.m. because she just wasn't hungry then. So it's just something to think about.
What did you guys do for after school? Do your kids like come straight home? There's a few activities at Glenfield. It's a little different school by school.
Yeah, my daughter did Model Congress some days, so she would stay after school, and then I would just pick her up after I picked up my son from his school. It's a little tricky when you have kids in elementary school and the middle school, the high school, sort of getting everybody picked up because my kids, they don't take the bus. So that was a little bit tricky, but I would usually get my daughter after school and then go to get my son at his school.
Mary Sue?
Yeah, so for my daughter, she was in, she either walks or gets a ride to school and from school. And she did Science Olympiad, which was every Monday after school so school gets out around 2:09. It would go until about 3:15 every Monday for most of the school year. And then she also she was in stage crew for the play, and the stage crew would often go later until, 4 or 5, particularly as it was getting closer to the play, which unfortunately didn't happen this year. So it kind of depends on what the different clubs are, but there's several different clubs available at Buzz. And then I would say a large percentage of Buzz kids go uptown on Fridays to, Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts and the pizza place and the Cold Stone, and kind of, wander around for a little while. We are lucky in that we live about 3/4 of a mile from Buzz, so she would often go uptown and then bring a group of her friends back to our house. So where I work from home. So again, I was very lucky in that way. But I think that there were sort of pods of students who maybe had a friend where there would be a parent home that they end up going to. There's also, for Buzz, there's a program called Side Door on Fridays, which is available until 5 o'clock every Friday. It's at Union Congregational Church, which is about a block over. It is not at all religious, and it's basically a place where kids can go and watch movies and play games, and they play basketball and all sorts of sports and stuff. And it's a free after-school program. So I do know that there's a good number of kids that will go to Side Door on Fridays as another option if they don't want to go into sort of uptown generally.
Yeah, uptown on Fridays can get a little bit Lord of Fly-ish kind of vibe to it. Sometimes, not always, but there is, if you've ever driven through Upper Manhattan, down Valley Road or Bellevue Avenue, anywhere between 2 and 5 p.m. on Fridays, you would have witnessed just, groups of children just running around everywhere. Very harmless, just very excited preteens. In addition to that, Friday hangout, Buzz has a large number of clubs that are managed by the teachers. Mary Sue mentioned a couple. I think my son was also a member of the robotics team and the ETC club, which is run by our STEM teacher, Mr. Taylor. And when it's the robotics season, basically I think the competition for state competition is in November. So between September and November, they actually meet 3 times a week. And there are some days that they're in there until 5 p.m. when they're building, and usually until about 4. So most clubs are about 2 hours. So they will come out at about 4:15. We used to be, our kids used to take the bus, but we have recently moved. So they have been walking to school, which is also actually, we found a great exercise in the morning. We know it's early, but it just gives them that boost of energy, wakes them up, and that physical activity, and burns off some of the energy that they have. So by the time they get to the classroom, they're actually much more attentive, we found, and much better at school. A specific schedule really depending on which clubs your kids are into and what they want to do. I believe the school organizes, if I remember correctly, organizes a night when all of these clubs, teachers who manage these clubs go into the gym with their tables and they introduce their clubs, and the kids kind of get to pick whichever one. But that's an after school activity, so it's not related to any electives that they pick. It's just something in addition to for the kids to do. But getting out at 2:09 has actually been amazing for us because I have two kids that play sports, and most of their practices start around 4 and 5. So having an ability for them on the days they don't have a club that is meeting, having them be at home by 2:30, finish all of the homework they had for that day, get a snack, and getting them into their equipment, into their uniforms, and being on a field, then playing for 2 hours, and still being able to get to dinner and put them to bed on time so they can wake up the next day, to make the bus at 7:15. It's been pretty good. The issue that you're going to come up with, which is what we were coming up with as we were getting closer to the spring and the training started, as the kids get older, and those of you that have kids in sports will know this, as your kids get older, their practices are that much later. So some of the practices my son had didn't end until 8 p.m., which is technically his bedtime. We still call it bedtime, but it's really not. But things don't end until really late. So that's sort of where you kind of get into trouble. This is why we always encourage school, homework, and then everything else. So that way, once you're done with your daily activities, you can just go to bed so you don't have to worry about it. So that's.
I'm just going to address really quickly a couple questions that have come up that didn't quite fit anywhere. There's a question about math placement. That is a little bit different this year, and I didn't want to make any of our panelists talk about something that is still, from our understanding, they are going to get recommended by their 5th grade teachers for math placement for next year.
So Ms. Gandhi, I believe at the call that we had on Thursday with Dr. Sack, Ms. Gandhi said that they will take into consideration that it's out of our hands. So really, if you need more information about it, you should speak to the principal. But what Ms. Gandhi said is that they are going to take into consideration the midterm grade. If the kids have taken the midterm, if they're a current 6th grader, they're going to take the 3 semesters that the kids were in school, and the third item will be the recommendations by the teacher. But again, this is what we were told. So if you need specific information, because that's something the district does, you should speak to the principal of the school.
Yeah, definitely reach out to your principals about math placement. And there's a question, is there art at Renaissance? It wasn't on the schedule. It wasn't on the website, Tom, but a parent asked.
Yes, there is. Yeah, sorry, there is.
So that's an elective option. Okay, well, in an effort to end on time, or close to it, I want to thank all of our panelists so much for being here. You guys have all been wonderful and really informative. If there is no CI gym. Math placement for incoming 6th graders, that's what we were just talking about. It's going to be handled by a combination of the 5th grade parents, or the 5th grade teachers, and the incoming 6th grade. But if you have specific questions, you need to reach out to your school directly. So thank you everybody for coming. Thank you especially to all of our panelists, and thank you, Marcy, for continuing to shepherd this and put this together so we could have this event tonight. If you guys have any more questions, we will post some contact information in the chat, but generally you can reach out to your principal or your PTA at any of the schools. If it's a parent-to-parent question, I would say try to the PTA first. And if it's a school or a placement issue, try your principal first. And good luck, everybody. I hope you guys have a great start of 6th grade, and I hope everybody has a wonderful summer. And thank you guys all for tuning in.